Okay, so one of the podcasts that I've done defines the difference between two ways of being. One where I see people as people, one where I see people as objects. And that way of being informs behavior. So in this podcast, I'm going to talk about what happens when we fundamentally change our way of being. Any of us. And why would we want to fundamentally change our way of being? And sometimes the term that's used or the phrase that's used to refer to that is a change of heart. So what does all that mean? So there's a man by the name of John Newton, 1772. And his dad, unfortunately, was a slave trader. And he learned this way of life as a child growing up, would go on these trading expeditions with his dad. And then he grew up and was now a slave trader himself. And one of the experiences having humans in the hull of the ship and going across the ocean and having a big weather difficulty and praying that everything would be okay. Well, it got very clear to him that what he was doing was wrong. And not only that he was sort of being duplicitous. He himself is a prayerful person, but he's taking human beings as cargo from one place to another. So the ludicrousness of that, of those two things, came into sharp contrast, and he felt very bad for what he had done with his life up to that point. And he just 100% changed. He became a different person. And he also was a rather creative man, and he wrote the lyrics to a song called Amazing Grace. That's where that song comes from. And the song was autobiographical. He was living a certain way, and in the context of Christian theology, he became a different person. He had a change of heart. A man by the name of Mikhail Gorbachev grew up. His dad was rather renowned for his farming abilities. And in the USSR at that time, citizens got awards basically from the government as recognition for being hard workers in their particular field. And so his dad was a recipient and was a very proud worker for the state. And he grew up that way as well. And he was a farmer, and he was all about, my duty is to supply and put in efforts for the party, for the state. And then he was also pretty smart and went to school, and a particular man that got to know him said, you know what, you ought to be, what you need to do, Mikhail, is go to school, continue your education, and get really involved with the party, the Communist Party. And he did that. So he was a loyal party member, and he believed in the concepts of communism philosophically. But he was also circumspect and observant, and ultimately wasn't hung up dogmatically speaking. And he observed that the whole world was operating in a particular way, and that the USSR was struggling in certain ways, and that the way that Russia was doing things might not be the perfect way to be doing things. And he continued to try to learn about this as a philosophical concept. We see footage of Ronald Reagan yelling, Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And those of you who were around back then and can remember, as I can, it was iconic scenes of the Berlin Wall falling down. And Reagan got a lot of credit for that. But the person who didn't get as much credit for it, and it would never happen, by the way, if he wasn't open to it happening, was Gorbachev. And he and Reagan had a lot of meetings, and there was a lot of political meanderings, but ultimately he decided to let the wall be torn down. Gorbachev decided to free his country in fundamental ways that would not have even been imagined when he was a kid and a young man farming. So he had what we would call a change of heart. This one way of approaching the world to a completely different way of approaching the world. Emperor Constantine, Roman emperor, it was legal and accepted at the time that anybody who was a Christian could be oppressed, basically, and it was a dangerous thing to be a Christian in the Roman world, and he abolished that and made it legal, in essence, to be a Christian, and made it illegal to oppress Christians and to treat them differently. Ironically, sometimes those things got completely reversed, hundreds of years later, and it was the Christians that now were oppressing everybody. But at the time, Constantine had a shift. He had one way of addressing the world, and he shifted. There was an emperor in India, 300 BCE, and his name was Ashoka. And he was a tyrannical, conquest-driven guy who sought to spread his kingdom, and he did so violently, and that went on for years. And one day, the story isn't completely exactly clear, but in effect, one day he noticed, walking through a city, the desolation that had occurred to these people from him as the king, emperor. And he just decided, I'm not going to do this anymore. And he converted to Buddhism, and he became a fanatically or very duty-driven proponent of peace. And he ended up building a lot of hospitals and a lot of, or the equivalent of hospitals and care facilities and ways to take care of the poor. And to this day, it's legendary in India that of the good that this emperor started to implement. So he had a particular way of approaching the world, and he had a completely other way of approaching the world. Now, if someone had come to John Newton and said, look, you need to change your behavior because it looks pretty bad that you're a slave trader, and so that could cause you some problems, somewhere down the road, or they may have taken a different approach. Economically, it's just not working anymore, so you need to, stop that. Then he probably, it would have been something like, oh, I see, I need to change my behavior. And so I'm going to go now take all of my profits from being a slave trader and go be a farmer now. And great. The The song Amazing Grace would have never come out of that because he just changed his behavior. Now, if somebody would have went to Mikhail Gorbachev and said, economically speaking, we probably need to address some issues here, or we need to change some policies and make things function better. Well, then he could have just hired a bunch of advisors and tried to solve the economic problems in Russia till the day he died. He actually started out that way and then knew that something deeper than that had to happen. But he could have just kept doing that, and we would still be in the Cold War with Russia today. Somebody could have come to Ashoka and said, look, you need to change your behavior because there's massive amounts of people out there that are getting upset, and this is going to cause a war, and it's going to ruin you, and the coffers, aren't all that full of gold like they used to be, or some kind of reasoning to get him to just change his behavior where he's not just killing everybody anymore. And he could just stopped, and then that would have never turned into being this convert to peacefulness, creating hospitals and ways to help the poor and all the things that he did. So a shift in behavior is not a change of heart. It's not the same thing. But a change of heart shifts behavior all on its own. So between John Newton and Mikhail Gorbachev and Ashoka and Constantine, as far as we can tell, these were changes of heart for them. Now, these are historical things, and we don't know all the details. Those are just examples. But in each one of us, if we've had trauma in our lives, and all we can see around the next corner is another way we might be victimized, we're walking with a certain way of being. And when we have a change of heart, then we no longer, in effect, seek for new ways that we're going to be victimized, but we now see new ways that we can be helpful to other people, for example. A change of heart manifests itself in a lot of different ways. And in that case that I just described, it's manifested in becoming somebody that is less of a victim mindset person. I might be just a ruthless businessman and then decide to, be more kind and generous with people. A particular time that it occurred with me was I worked out in the wilderness with young people. And it was a group of girls, and one of these girls made fun of the other girls the whole time she was there. And some of them were talking about like painful things, and she would just snicker at them. And she would do things that would, it's like she was trying to invite out of the students and out of staff to be grossed out by what she was doing. Well, when her therapist came, me and the other two staff went to him and said, look, she's causing problems. She's rude. She's this and that. And he said, do you guys know anything about her history, like why she came? And we didn't. And I remember thinking, to my regret, why does that even matter? Her behavior is horrible. What has contributed to that that's not out here with us, I don't even know. I don't care. I just want her behavior to stop. And he said her mom and dad both work. Her mom's dad came to live with them. This girl has been molested by her grandfather almost every day up until a week and a half ago when she came to this program. What do you think now? And I remember just thinking, I'm a jerk you know. I was, part of me was trying to be this protector of the feelings of other people. Like I'm the sort of person who, is, I don't know, some kind of, almost trying to see myself in a good way, as a justification. But I felt at that point just horrible for not having tried to see this girl as a person. And it changed everything. We went back into the group and our hearts were different. Our way of being was different towards her. And things started to shift from then on. She became leader of the group. Each of us have what I'm going to call micro heart change opportunities as well. It doesn't have to be dramatic like Constantine and completely changing the policies of the Roman Empire, but we may yell less at our children after we have a certain experience or something touches our heart. Now I want to talk a little bit about the heart, because people say heart change. I had a change of heart. What does that even mean? Well, it's only recent that it's been discovered that the heart contains cells that are very similar to neurons in the brain. They're called sensory neurites, and there's thousands of them. And more signals go from the heart to the brain than go from the brain to the heart. So if one organ is receiving instruction, if you want to call signals an instruction, if one organ is receiving instruction from the other, the brain is actually receiving more instruction from the heart than the heart is from the brain. So and when we're developing as a little child in the belly as a fetus, the first thing that is made, or that comes into shape, so to speak, is the heart. That's the first thing we are as a human being, is a heart. And then the stem cells that have turned into a heart shift, signaled by the heart, and they now start building a liver, and then it goes from there. Brain is like several things away. It all starts from the heart. So, in my opinion, across cultures, across time, anciently, when people have said things like, follow your heart, or that kind of thing, it's an intuitive understanding that our hearts, what goes on in our heart has meaning. There's been a lot of studies about heart transplants and people who get a heart transplant and then have the same kind of favorite foods and, weird stuff like that the person whose heart it was had. So there's information locked in our hearts, and there's information that flows out of it. And to have a change of way of being, another way of saying that is to have a change of heart. And why do we want to have a change of heart? Why do we want to be a person who has a change of heart continuously? Well, because that's the way to become a happier human being. And to the degree that we remain open to this concept that my heart can change again and again and again, then our life will become happier and happier and happier and happier. The specificity of what kind of heart change any and all of us need to make obviously is very varied and personal. And to contemplate that every day could be an opportunity for me to have a change of heart. Even though I had a change of heart yesterday, but to have a change of heart again, to have a improvement in the direction that my heart is going, will take me to places that I don't know that I don't even understand. Like, I know for me, I feel happier now, calmer now, more peaceful now than I have in the past. But while I was there, I wouldn't know how this feels because it requires a change of heart to get from there to where I am now. So I don't even know. There's levels of joy and happiness that I can't even comprehend unless I look for, take advantage of, seek to have a change of heart over and over and over again. And in some cases, it's a massive change of heart to become a out-of-the-box person, a more responsive person, an I, thou person fundamentally. But from then on, we can still slip. So little changes of heart along the way continue to help along the way. When we look for problems, we find them. When we look for ways to justify our behavior, we will find them. When we look for reasons to have a change of heart, to become a happier person, we will find them. A lot of ways they'll find us. And then we don't have to go get an instruction manual on what to do in life. We will become the instruction manual from the deep place inside of us that the proper responses and the right kind of behavior just flows from. Thanks.